There are moments in a pilot's life when all the years of training, all the simulator hours, and all the accumulated experience come down to a few crucial minutes. Moments when you realize you're not just piloting an aircraft, but carrying with you the hopes, dreams, and lives of every person who trusted you to safely take them to their destination. My name is Michael Thompson. I'm a captain with a major American airline, and I've been flying for 15 years with over 12,000 flight hours. I've faced storms that seemed to want to rip the wings off the plane, turbulence that tested my determination, and landings in conditions that would make any pilot break into a cold sweat. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened on that March 23rd, on a flight that should have been just another routine trip from Los Angeles to Miami. It was a typical Tuesday. The weather was favorable, with calm winds and excellent visibility. Our Airbus A320 was loaded with 180 passengers and a crew of 6. I was in the left seat as captain, and my first officer, David Rodriguez, an experienced young pilot I'd flown with several times before, occupied the right seat. Our cabin crew consisted of 4 highly trained flight attendants, led by Purser Sarah, a professional with over 20 years of experience. Flight 1847 departed punctually at 2:30 p.m. from Los Angeles International Airport. The takeoff was smooth, as we always expect in an A320. We climbed through scattered cloud layers over Los Angeles, following the planned route eastward. The passengers seemed relaxed. Some were sleeping, others reading, many working on their electronic devices. It was exactly the type of flight every commercial pilot expects: uneventful, professional, and safe. When we reached our cruise altitude of 39,000 feet, about 40 minutes after takeoff, I allowed myself to relax a bit. The autopilot was engaged, all engine parameters were normal, and our estimated flight time remained on schedule. David and I were discussing standard procedures when, at 3:12 p.m., our reality completely changed. The first sign was a sound no pilot ever wants to hear: a loud, irregular, metallic bang coming from the right side of the aircraft. Immediately, I felt the aircraft vibrate in a completely abnormal way. My eyes instantly darted to the instrument panel, where several warning lights began flashing simultaneously. "Engine 2 failure," I shouted to David, while my hands were already moving automatically to initiate emergency procedures we'd practiced hundreds of times in the simulator, but hoped never to use in real life. The right engine, our number 2 engine, had literally exploded. It wasn't a simple failure or controlled shutdown. It was an explosion that fragmented internal engine parts, creating a catastrophic failure that sent metal debris flying through the air. Some of these fragments struck the fuselage, causing small perforations that resulted in cabin depressurization. The first thing I did was take manual control of the aircraft, disconnecting the autopilot. The A320 was banking dangerously to the right due to the loss of thrust from the engine, and I needed to compensate immediately with rudder and ailerons. It was like trying to balance a heavy object with one side much lighter than the other. "David, engine failure in cruise checklist now," I commanded, while fighting to keep the aircraft level. "Roger, Captain," David responded, his voice showing the tension of the moment but maintaining the professional calm every first officer must have. His hands flew over the panel as he located the appropriate checklist in our procedures manual. Simultaneously, oxygen masks dropped automatically over our faces due to the depressurization. The noise in the cockpit increased considerably because of air being sucked through the small openings created by the engine fragments. Los Angeles Center, American 1847, declaring emergency. We've had a right engine explosion and cabin depressurization. Requesting immediate descent and vectors to nearest airport, I transmitted over the radio, using the phonetic alphabet that's standard in aviation worldwide. The response came almost immediately. American 1847, Los Angeles Center copies emergency. Cleared immediate descent to 10,000 feet, turn right heading zone 90 for LAX. Airport preparing for emergency. Roger, descending to 10,000, right turn 090, American 1847, I confirmed. Initiating an emergency descent from 39,000 to 10,000 feet isn't simple. You need to descend quickly to reach an altitude where passengers can breathe without supplemental oxygen. But you can't descend so fast that it causes structural damage to the aircraft or extreme discomfort to passengers. As we initiated the descent, David continued following the engine failure checklist. Engine 2, fuel shut-off. Hydraulic system 2, checking. Electrical system, compensating for single engine. Each checklist item was crucial. Shutting off fuel to the failed engine prevented a fire, which would be our worst concern at that moment. Checking hydraulic systems ensured we still had full control of the aircraft. Compensating the electrical system assured that all essential instruments would continue functioning. But then I noticed something that made my stomach sink. The right side fuel indicator was dropping much faster than it should. The explosion had damaged fuel lines, and we were losing fuel at an alarming rate. "David, look at the right side fuel," I said, pointing to the instrument. His eyes widened when he saw the numbers. "Captain, we're losing fuel rapidly. At this rate, we have maybe 15 minutes before we exhaust our remaining fuel." 15 minutes. 15 minutes to land an airplane with 186 people on board, with one engine running, compromised systems, and leaking fuel. That was the moment I felt the real weight of responsibility. These weren't just numbers or statistics. They were 180 passengers who trusted me to take them safely home, to their families, to their jobs, to their lives. Los Angeles Center, American 1847. We have severe fuel loss. We estimate only 15 minutes of fuel remaining. We need direct clearance to LAX, maximum priority, I transmitted, trying to keep my voice calm and professional, even though inside I felt adrenaline coursing through my veins. American 1847 understood. You have total priority. All runways being cleared, fire trucks and ambulances being positioned. What's your landing intention? Los Angeles Center. We're going for runway 06R. Request full runway block and foam on the sides, I replied. While maintaining communication with control, I instructed David to calculate our possibilities. Calculate our current distance to LAX and time needed to get there on one engine. David worked quickly with the flight computer. Captain, we're approximately 180 nautical miles from LAX. With one engine, our speed will be reduced. We estimate between 18 to 20 minutes to get there. 20 minutes with only 15 minutes of fuel. The math didn't work, and we all knew it. That was when I had to make one of the most difficult decisions of my career. We needed to find a closer alternative, or we'd have to attempt an engine-out landing, something that's possible but extremely dangerous, with 180 lives on board. Los Angeles Center, we need closer alternate airports from our current position, I requested. American 1847. You have Burbank at approximately 100 nautical miles from your current position, and Long Beach at 120 miles. Burbank was closer, but it was a smaller airport with fewer emergency resources. Long Beach had an excellent runway, but was a bit farther. Every minute counted, and each decision could be the difference between life and death. David, what do you think? Burbank or try to stretch it to LAX? David looked at the instruments, made some quick calculations and responded, Captain, if we reduce speed even more and optimize our descent, maybe we can stretch the fuel, but it'll be very tight. I made the decision. Los Angeles Center, we're staying with LAX as destination. We'll try to optimize our flight to conserve fuel. Understood, American 1847. Keep us informed of any changes in your situation. Now we needed to do something we rarely practice. Fly with extreme fuel efficiency with only one engine operating. This meant finding the ideal altitude, ideal speed, and ideal descent angle to maximize every drop of remaining fuel. David, let's reduce to maximum range speed and adjust our descent to a more gradual profile, I instructed. As we adjusted flight parameters, I felt the aircraft respond differently. With only one engine, it was less responsive and required constant compensation to maintain level flight. It was like driving a car with only 3 wheels. Possible, but requiring constant concentration. At that moment, I remembered the passengers. They had certainly felt the initial explosion and rapid descent, but probably didn't fully understand the gravity of the situation. I decided to make an announcement to keep them informed without causing panic. I picked up the cabin microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We've had a technical issue with one of our engines and are returning to Los Angeles as a precaution. Our systems are functioning normally, and we expect to land in approximately 15 minutes. Please keep your seat belts fastened and follow instructions from our cabin crew. It was a softened version of reality, but sufficient to keep passengers informed without creating unnecessary panic. The last thing we needed was panicked passengers complicating an already delicate situation. Sarah, our lead flight attendant, called the cockpit. "Captain, passengers are relatively calm. We had some questions about the explosion noise, but we managed to reassure them. How should I prepare the cabin?" "Sarah, prepare the cabin for an emergency landing. Brace position, exit checks, and full briefing for the entire crew. We don't know how our landing will be," I replied. "Understood, Captain. We're preparing everything." Meanwhile, we continued our approach to LAX. Each passing minute, the fuel indicator showed lower numbers. It was like watching an hourglass, knowing that when the sand ran out, our options would become extremely limited. Los Angeles approach. American 1847 passing 20,000 in descent to 10,000. How's airport preparation? American 1847. Runway 06R is completely clear. Fire trucks positioned along runway sides. Ambulances on standby. Emergency teams ready for any eventuality. Those words gave me some comfort. Knowing there was an entire team of professionals preparing to receive us made a difference. We weren't alone in this situation. When we reached 10,000 feet, I was able to remove my oxygen mask. Cabin pressure had stabilized, and passengers no longer needed the masks that had dropped automatically during the initial depressurization. "David, how much fuel do we still have?" He checked the instruments. "Approximately 1,800 pounds, Captain. Enough for another 8 to 10 minutes of flight." 10 minutes. We were still about 12 minutes from LAX. The math still didn't work, but we had no choice but to continue and hope our calculations were conservative. It was then that a new complication arose. Hydraulic system number 2, which had been damaged by the engine explosion, began showing intermittent failures. This meant our control over flight controls was becoming more difficult. "Captain, we're losing hydraulic pressure in System 2, David informed, pointing to another warning light that had illuminated. The hydraulic system in a commercial aircraft is crucial for operating flight controls, brakes, and landing gear. Losing one hydraulic system isn't catastrophic, as there are redundancies, but it significantly complicates aircraft operation." "Understood. We'll use the manual system as backup and prepare for a more challenging landing," I replied, beginning to mentally prepare for a landing that would be much more difficult than anything I'd ever done. While we struggled with these technical problems, my mind returned to training. I remembered all the times my instructor at flight school repeated, "Aviate first, navigate second, communicate third." That was exactly what we were doing, keeping the aircraft flying, navigating to our destination, and communicating our situation. LAX approach. American 1847 requesting vectors ILS runway 06R. I transmitted as we approached LAX's terminal area. American 1847 LAX approach. Turn left heading 360. Descend and maintain 5,000 feet. You're being vectored to intercept the ILS for runway 06R. The ILS, or Instrument Landing System, would give us precise electronic guidance for landing, something crucial when you have only one engine operating and compromised hydraulic systems. When we intercepted the ILS course, I could see LAX in the distance. The runway lights were clearly visible, and I could see fire trucks positioned along the runway ready for any eventuality. "David, how much fuel now?" 900 pounds, Captain. Estimated time 3 to 4 minutes. 3 minutes of fuel for a landing that normally takes 5 minutes to complete. It was literally a race against time. LAX Tower, American 1847 established on the ILS 06R final approach. American 1847 LAX Tower, wind 070 degrees at 8 knots. Runway 06R cleared to land, fire trucks in position. We began our final approach. With only one engine operating, the aircraft responded very differently. I needed to apply more rudder to compensate for thrust asymmetry, and our approach speed was slightly higher than normal to maintain adequate control. At 1,000 feet, all parameters were stabilized. At 500 feet, I could clearly see the runway ahead. At 200 feet, I felt we'd make it. But then, at just 100 feet from the runway, the remaining engine began to sputter. The fuel was running out. "Engine 1 fuel starvation," David shouted. At that moment, we had two options: attempt a glide landing or apply all remaining power to ensure we touched the runway. I chose the second option. "Applying maximum power," I announced, pushing the thrust lever to the limit. The engine responded for a few crucial seconds, giving us the thrust needed to maintain our landing trajectory. We managed to touch down smoothly, but the engine stopped completely at the moment of touchdown. Now we faced a new challenge: stopping a heavy A320 on a runway with brakes compromised by hydraulic failure and no reverse thrust from the failed engine. I applied brakes gradually, feeling the aircraft decelerate more slowly than normal. We used the full length of LAX's 12,000-foot runway, but managed to stop completely about 600 feet from the runway end. Tower, American 1847 stopped on runway. Request aircraft inspection before taxi, I transmitted. American 1847, remain on runway. Fire trucks approaching for inspection. While waiting for inspection, I could finally allow myself to relax a bit. I looked at David, who was visibly relieved, and said, "Good job, partner, excellent teamwork." "Captain, that was incredible. I never thought we'd go through something like this," he replied, still processing what had happened. The firefighters conducted a quick inspection of the aircraft and confirmed there was no fire risk. The exploded engine was visually damaged but contained in its nacelle, as designed for catastrophic failure situations. The American 1847, inspection complete. You're cleared to taxi to the gate with fire truck escort. We taxied slowly to the gate, where a crowd of mechanics, supervisors, and emergency teams awaited us. When I finally shut down the aircraft systems, I felt a mix of exhaustion and relief I'd never experienced before. I then made the final announcement to passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We've landed safely at LAX. Please remain seated while jet bridges are positioned. On behalf of the entire crew, thank you for your patience and cooperation during this unusual situation." The deplaning was orderly and calm. Many passengers stopped to thank the crew, some visibly emotional upon realizing the gravity of the situation we'd faced together. After all passengers deplaned, our crew met for an initial debriefing. Sarah commented how the cabin crew had kept passengers calm throughout the emergency, perfectly following safety protocols. In the following hours, we had to deal with reports, investigators, and detailed analysis of everything that had happened. The engine had suffered a turbine disc failure, something rare but not unprecedented in commercial aviation. The explosion had been contained by the engine casing as designed, but some smaller fragments had punctured the fuselage, causing depressurization. The subsequent investigation revealed that our fuel management had been nearly perfect. We managed to land with only 110 pounds of fuel remaining, less than 2 minutes of flight time. Any error in our calculations or decisions could have resulted in an attempted engine-out landing, something much more risky. In the days that followed, I received calls from fellow pilots, company superiors, and even family members of passengers, all praising our performance during the emergency. But what struck me most was a chance encounter with one of the passengers a few weeks later. I was shopping at a mall when a gentleman approached me. "Are you Captain Thompson from Flight 1847? "Yes, I am," I replied. "I was in seat 15A that day. I want you to know my daughter was getting married the following week, and thanks to you and your crew, I was able to be present at her wedding. I have no words to thank you." Moments like that remind me why I chose to be a pilot. It's not just about flying aircraft or following procedures. It's about the sacred responsibility of caring for human lives, ensuring that each person who trusts you arrives safely at their destination. That experience changed my perspective on many things. It reinforced my belief in the importance of continuous training, teamwork, and composure under pressure. It also taught me that no matter how much we prepare for emergencies, each real situation brings its own unique challenges. Today, when I train new pilots or share experiences at safety seminars, I always emphasize that commercial aviation is one of the safest forms of transportation precisely because we learn from each event, each emergency, each experience that tests our limits. Flight 1847 also resulted in some changes to company procedures. We revised our fuel management protocols in emergencies and reinforced training for multiple system failure situations. Each lesson learned makes subsequent flights safer for everyone. David, my first officer that day, is now a captain, and frequently tells me how that experience influenced his career. He says he learned more about aviation in those 15 critical minutes than in months of routine flying. The cabin crew was also recognized for their exemplary performance. Sarah and her team kept passengers calm and prepared throughout the emergency, following safety protocols that saved lives. In emergency situations, the difference between a well-trained crew and an unprepared one can literally be a matter of life or death. Looking back, I realize those 15 minutes tested not only my technical skill as a pilot, but also my ability to make quick decisions under extreme pressure, to lead a team in critical moments, and to maintain composure when 180 lives depended on my choices. The official investigation concluded that the engine failure was caused by metal fatigue in one of the high-pressure turbine blades, something that occurs very rarely but is within calculated risk parameters of the aerospace industry. The important thing is that all safety systems functioned as designed. The engine contained the explosion. Redundant systems allowed us to maintain aircraft control, and our ability to land safely was preserved. This experience also taught me about the importance of clear and honest communication during emergencies. Keeping passengers informed without causing panic is an art that requires practice and sensitivity. They had the right to know we were facing an abnormal situation, but also needed to trust our ability to solve the problem. One aspect many people don't understand is how simulator training translates to real situations. For years I practiced engine failures, emergency descents, and landings with compromised systems in a controlled environment. When the real situation happened, my body and mind responded automatically, executing procedures that had become second nature through constant repetition. But the simulator can't completely replicate the psychological pressure of knowing real lives are in your hands. That's a dimension of commercial aviation that's only experienced in real emergency situations, and it's something that profoundly marks any pilot. Today, almost 2 years after the incident, I still fly commercially and love my profession as much as I always have. But I carry with me the humility of knowing that regardless of how much experience we have, aviation can always surprise us with situations that test our limits. Safety in aviation is built on multiple layers of protection: rigorous maintenance, constant training, well-defined procedures, advanced technology, and fundamentally, professionals committed to excellence. When one of these layers fails, the others are there to protect lives. The Flight 1847 incident was a perfect example of how these safety layers work in practice. When the engine failed, our training took control. When fuel became critical, our procedures guided us. When hydraulic systems failed, our experience compensated. And when fuel finally ran out, our determination carried us to the runway. Every passenger who was with us that day returned safely to their families. For me, that's the only statistic that really matters. They're not numbers in reports or data in spreadsheets. They're human lives, personal stories, dreams, and hopes that were preserved through the professionalism and dedication of an entire team. When young pilots ask me about handling emergencies, I always say preparation is fundamental, but it's also important to accept that each situation will be unique. There's no manual that covers every possibility, but there's a solid foundation of knowledge, procedures, and principles that guide us when we face the unexpected. Aviation has taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the ability to function effectively despite fear. In those 15 critical minutes, I felt fear, felt pressure, felt the weight of responsibility. But I continued functioning, making decisions, leading my team, and flying the aircraft, because that's what needed to be done. This experience also reinforced my belief in the importance of teamwork in aviation. No pilot flies alone, regardless of who's commanding the aircraft. David was fundamental with his quick calculations and precise execution of procedures. Sarah and her team maintained calm in the cabin. Air traffic control gave us total priority. Firefighters and emergency teams were ready for any eventuality. It was truly a collective effort. Years of experience have taught me that aviation is both an art and a science. The science is the procedures, systems, calculations, and regulations. The art is knowing when to rigidly follow procedures and when to adapt to unique circumstances. When to trust instruments and when to trust intuition developed through experience. Flight 1847 required both science and art. We followed established procedures for engine failure and emergency management, but also had to adapt our strategy when we realized fuel wouldn't be sufficient to reach the original destination. We used our technical knowledge to optimize fuel consumption, but also relied on our experience to make a safe landing in adverse conditions. One of the questions I receive most is whether I'd be nervous to fly again after an experience like that. The answer is no. If anything, this experience reinforced my confidence in the aviation system as a whole. I saw firsthand how safety systems work, how training translates into effective action, and how dedicated professionals can overcome extremely challenging situations. This doesn't mean I've become complacent. On the contrary, I maintain even greater respect for the responsibility I carry every time I take command of a commercial aircraft. Each flight is an opportunity to apply lessons learned and continue perfecting my skill as a pilot and leader. The aviation industry has evolved tremendously since I started flying, always in the direction of greater safety. New warning systems, better procedures, more realistic training and more advanced technology continue making commercial flight increasingly safer. But ultimately, it's people who make the difference. Well-trained pilots, conscientious mechanics, dedicated air traffic controllers and crew members committed to safety. The legacy of Flight 1847 goes beyond our individual experience. The investigation report was studied by airlines around the world, contributing to improvements in emergency procedures and crew training. Our experience became part of aviation's collective knowledge, helping make future flights safer. This reminds me of something my first flight instructor told me years ago. In aviation, we learn from every experience, ours and others. Each flight, each emergency, each success and each error contributes to the collective knowledge that keeps millions of people safe in the skies every day. Today, when I see an A320 taking off, I remember that inside that extraordinary machine are not only sophisticated systems and advanced technology, but also decades of accumulated experience, lessons sometimes learned the hard way, and the commitment of professionals who chose to dedicate their careers to safe aviation. The sky continues to be my office, and each day brings new challenges and opportunities. But I always carry with me the memory of those 15 minutes that tested everything I knew about flying, about leading, and about the responsibility of caring for human lives at 39,000 feet. For me, being a pilot means much more than simply operating an aircraft. It means being a guardian of dreams, facilitator of reunions, and responsible for safely taking people to the most important moments of their lives. It's a responsibility I accept with pride and humility every day. And when young people dream of becoming pilots, I hope they understand they've chosen a profession that will test them in ways they never imagined, but will also give them the opportunity to make a real difference in other people's lives. There's no feeling in the world comparable to knowing you brought 180 people safely home in a situation that could have ended very differently. The flight continues, lessons continue being learned, and the commitment to safety continues being renewed with every takeoff. Because ultimately, regardless of what technology we have or what systems we develop, aviation will always be about people caring for people. And that's a responsibility I take seriously every day of my career. Sometimes 15 minutes can change everything. They can test years of training, decades of experience, and the limits of your leadership capacity. But when you have a prepared team, solid procedures, and the determination to never give up, those 15 minutes can also be the most rewarding of your professional career. Flying is, and always will be, both a privilege and a responsibility. And it's a responsibility I feel honored to carry today and always, in the skies of America and the world. If you enjoyed this real story from the skies, subscribe to the Black Box channel so you don't miss the next account. Leave in the comments what type of flight situation you'd like to learn about, and share this video with friends who also have a passion for aviation. See you in the next episode, where once again we'll uncover the mysteries and extraordinary experiences that happen every day in skies around the world.